Hi, lovely people. I'm talking today about mental health. I saw my lighting out a bit, and talking about my story and my recovery from some of the issues that I've struggled with in my life, and using the 5 foundations that I have explained before on my YouTube channel that I use as a framework to help people recover their health. We had Mental Health Awareness Week here in the UK last week, and it just got me thinking about my own story and how actually my own stories really changed the way I practice as a doctor. And I'm really hoping that I wish I had known some of the things that I know now. And I would say, like, on the whole, I've made a really good recovery with my mental health over these last few years, but I wish I had known some of the things I know now, and certainly wish I could have helped some of my patients earlier on in my career with what I know. And I'm hoping to just put some tools into your hands to help you in your own journeys, whether you struggle with your emotional health or mental health. My story probably started in my early teens. I really struggled with my confidence. I really struggled with my self-image, and got into a terrible cycle around self-hatred. And the way that I controlled my environment back there was through food. And got into a 10-year cycle of bulimia and anorexia. And it wasn't really until my mid-20s did I really get free of that. And I look back now at photos of myself and think, oh my goodness, like, what was I thinking? But at that time, like, those thoughts inside, go round and round in your head, kind of triggering all of these negative and dark emotions, feel so much truer and realer than what anybody around you would tell you in terms of how you look. And and I think in that time, I got some professional help and sort of went with some of the more traditional kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, where I started to unpack, like, where the thoughts were coming from, and looking at sort of rebuilding a new story in my head. And I have many times when I would just stand in front of the mirror and I'd tell myself a new story, even though I didn't feel any of it. And eventually that new story and that new narrative that I told myself became part of my thinking. And that was an important part of, an important tool in learning and getting a measure of recovery and freedom back in my 20s, and kind of breaking that cycle of bulimia and anorexia. And then in my, and it's not as simple as that. Like, I'll go on later to tell you about some of the many things that we can do to help our mental health, but I'm just recounting the little bits that I did in my own story, and then I'll share a little bit more of what I understand now. And then in my mid-20s, I had trained as a doctor and worked as a house officer, and we were doing these horrific long hours, and I'd got married that year as well. And then the wheels fell off at the end of that year. And actually, I went down the medication route that time and went to see my doctor, and he offered me more CBT and I think it was fluoxetine, Prozac at the time. And I was really desperate and so exhausted and couldn't function mentally. And I tried the medication and I was thinking, you know what, this isn't working for me. And actually, during that time, do you know what? I was just exhausted, and I actually took some time off work. I took 4 months off work, and if I'm really honest, I just slept myself better, and started exercising again, and started making some decisions about what I was eating. And then later on in my 30s, I've got 3 daughters, many of you know, and I had a really difficult birth with my first daughter when we were living out in Uganda, and got post-traumatic distress and developed really awful postnatal depression. And I had no idea that I was depressed. I just thought I was tired, and this is what childbirth does and mothering is, and spent many, many months in a very, very dark place. It went on to have my second child, came back, and we moved back to the UK and developed, further postnatal depression. And as I said, they were some of the darkest times of my life. And I got to the point where I convinced myself my family would be better without me, and still didn't reach out for any help. and made this very, very gradual recovery. And it wasn't until my third child, when I didn't have postnatal depression, and I think on reflection, me and my husband realised how ill I had been, and we made some plans around when I had her to get more support, did I realise how ill I had been and how much had been robbed from me in terms of enjoying my first two children in their younger years. So it's always been with me, this kind of battle to maintain my mental health. And I think, if you're like me and you've struggled historically or are struggling, I don't want to sound like pessimistic, but you never really recover like that confidence in life. And I think, you're aware, I'm very aware now that I have to pace, and I'm very aware of my limitations. And sometimes I can look on the world and just think, oh my goodness, how do they have the energy to do all this? And yet if I don't respect the way I'm made and the things that I've learnt about how I need to live and how I need to structure my life, I very easily get ill again. And in a way, I think I've probably befriended some of those darker feelings, because they're just telling me that I am not pacing and living my life how I need to do that. And so now I've really learned to recognise a lot earlier signs around what triggers that decline in my mental health, and then learned some things to put in place to help me recover that. And so I just want to say, like, if you're in a place where you're very depressed or struggling with anxiety or struggling with other mental health issues, like, you are not alone. Like, so many of us and so many people before me have gone through this, and many have come out the other side, and there is so much help there. And I think one of the really deceiving things about when you're low and when things are very dark and you think, I always say my brain just feels like it's treacle, like I can't think, and the emotions can be so overwhelming and so real. Like, you need to learn to coach yourself. And tell yourself some truths, that you are not alone and there is help. And actually, sometimes the action of just reaching out, even if it's phoning Samaritans or phoning a friend or phoning someone that's safe to you, sometimes just the action of reaching out and connecting with someone is just enough to tip that balance and bring you back from the brink, so that you can then start making some other decisions. So, and I'm going to mention like lots of things that we can do to help recover our mental health. But I'm also really aware, especially if you're feeling low or extremely anxious, that itself can just feel so overwhelming. And so, this is something that you might want to go back and look at with a friend and pick out some little things that you can do. My heart is to give you some keys to help you recover. And sometimes you need one key, sometimes you need the whole barrage to get better. But it's making those little decisions just to get, some traction around feeling better. And I think then it's understanding that you need to then create rhythms that maintain that and maintain that life. And you have to become like the architect of your own life. Like, nobody else is going to mend you. Medication might have a part to play. And please hear me, if you're on medicine, like, I don't condemn you in the slightest. Like, that's been part of my story too. But it's not the solution. It can be part of the solution. It can help give you the energy to make some other decisions around things that can help you get better. So I just want to say that you're not alone, and I want to say that there is hope. I certainly remember when I was in my darkest place after having my second child, and I'd made some changes and was just starting to recover, just coming out that dark place. And a colleague of mine who was in a very, very similar situation went on to commit suicide, and I remember reflecting, like, oh my goodness, like, in the time, like, when you're so low, it feels so real, and you think it will never change, and you think you can never get better. But part of it is an illness, and there is hope, and you can get better. And it's just finding those things to help you get there. Let me mention one thing, like one of the things that really frustrates me about how we're trained as doctors is that we still have this very linear view around disease. So, you know, if you've got a mental health problem, you must have a problem with your brain. You know, if you've got, you know, pain in your arm, it has to come from your arm. If you've got a liver problem, it must be the liver. But actually, you know, we are this incredible sort of interconnected web of communication of all of our different systems of our body, and just like a spider's web, if you pull it out at one place, it will go, you know, and manifest a deformity in the rest of that web. And it's the same with our body, and it's the same with depression. Like, your depression could be rooted in something that's completely different to mine. And this is why, you know, this very conventional way of diagnosing a disease and then treating a disease does not work again. And actually, you know, you have to treat people individually, and you have to work out what is the dysfunction in their whole body, because that could be the cause for their depression or anxiety or psychiatric illness. And there's so many times, like, where, you know, historically I would have done the same. You fit the diagnoses for depression, here's 6 weeks cognitive behavioral therapy, and here's your medication, and not realizing that actually, you know, it could be your thyroid, it could be, you know, that you've got an upset in your gut and with your gut bacteria, it could be chronic pain. Like, so many times actually psychiatric disorders are probably sleep disorders, so it could be an issue with your sleep. It could be an iron deficiency. I've seen that many a times. Had a patient last year who had severe iron deficiency, and she was extremely anxious. We did nothing but really address her iron, and then she had the capacity to get better. It could be the medication that we as medics have put you on. It can be addiction, it can be stress, it can be trauma, childhood trauma. Gosh, I listen to people's stories, and I am amazed that they get to like 40s and 50s and start to fall apart when you hear like what they have been through, and some of those things that happen in childhood that set your thought patterns and your stress levels and your identity, and how they stay with us throughout life, and then suddenly people fall apart later in life, and so all of these things, like, we need to be digging deep, you know, working out what is going on in you. The other thing to mention, like, one of the member of my own family, you know, presented with anxiety and depression, and again fit the criteria beautifully. But when we dug deeper, it turned out he'd actually got celiac disease, and actually when we dealt with that issue, that helped his mental health. And so this idea that mental health is just all about a brain dysfunction just isn't true. Like, it just doesn't work, and we have to look at the whole of you, and we have to try and create a personalized plan addressing all of the issues, so that you can thrive and really embrace health. And so I think before I've shared a little bit of my story about how I got into into developing this kind of way of doing medicine. And again, I lost my health for different reasons about 5 years ago, went down the conventional route. I'd been practicing as a doctor for about 15 years then, and ended up getting a diagnosis from a neurologist and getting drugs. And I had this moment with him where I was like, gosh, you know, isn't there a better way? You know, is there anything I can do? And I'll never forget the moment that he just gave me another prescription and said, here, Sally, try this. And that was the tipping point for me, like, of thinking, no, there has to be a better way. And for me, I went back to the books. I started doing research and started asking, well, what does my body need to flourish and to thrive? And, you know, in that journey, just discovering like that actually, you know, we talk about our genetic material being the thing that influences our health, you know, that kind of material that genetics that's handed down from our parents. But when you look at the research, actually, like, while 10% of illness is due to that, like 90% is to do with our lifestyle choices. And actually, when we create an environment for our bodies, they are wired to heal. Like, your body is wired to maintain your mental health. And we just need to work out and create an environment that is personal to you do that will look different to the person that's next to you, and you may not be able to do the things that they do, but you can have peace and you can have a clear mind, and you can know happiness and you can know joy, and you can know how to get back. And actually, let's just say for a minute, sadness and depression, there's a place for that that makes us human. And so wellness isn't the absence of a struggle with mental health, or even a struggle with different areas of our health. So they are part of our life story, but when it robs you of that ability to do the things that you'd like to be doing and to enjoy the present, then that's an issue, and we need to learn how to maintain our emotions in a way that doesn't stop us fulfilling our life's purpose. So, gosh, I've rabbited on. But anyway, I'll be telling you some things of what you can do. But out of that time, I created a framework that looks at 5 foundations that underpin health. And they would be sleep, movement, nutrition, rest, and connection. So connection with self, connection with each other, and connection with that wider sense of purpose. And I use that framework, to help create health plans that help people get healthy and reverse disease. And I use that for all sorts of diseases, whether that's obesity or diabetes or mental health issues or autoimmune diseases or gut issues. I will often use it as a framework, and certainly I use it in my own life and the life of my families to help maintain health. So when we're thinking about mental health in particular, like I just mentioned earlier, there are probably a lot of psychiatric disorders out there that are not psychiatric disorders, they are sleep disorders. So back in the 90s when I trained, we had no idea why you slept. We knew that if you didn't sleep, you died. And so we knew it was important, but we didn't understand what was going on in our brain. And as science has advanced over the last sort of 20 years, we have learned the most phenomenal amount about what goes on in our sleep, and it is the healer, and especially not especially, because it's important for all sorts of aspects of our health, for fighting infection, for fighting cancer, for reducing blood pressure, for maintaining blood sugars, for for maintaining ideal weight. It's vital in all of these things for the healing of our body, but it's also really vital for emotional health. And I don't want to tell you the science about that, but so if you look at how much we slept 75 years ago, like we were sleeping 8 hours a day, and now, like when you look at the average amount people are sleeping, on average we're sleeping sort of 6-7 hours. It's almost 25% less than years ago, and that's really significant, because your body actually needs those 7.5 to 9 hours. Again, it's very unique for each individual. But it needs that to do all those really incredibly important roles in every aspect of our health. Like sleep is the one thing that touches every nook and cranny of our body and every system that we have. And every night it goes about healing that up. And especially there's different types of sleep as well. So when you're if you don't get dream sleep, this REM sleep, they did this awful study, I think it was back in the 50s, where they kept waking people up every time they went into dream sleep, and after 3 days they were manifesting psychiatric disorders, having never had problems with their mental health. So it's not only just getting the right amount of sleep, it's getting the right type and the right depth of sleep. And so when it comes to mental health, your quickest win is to prioritize sleep. And for some, that's all they need to do. Like, it's not that you need 8 hours in bed, you need 8 hours of sleep. So for some, that is simply just turning off Netflix and getting to bed on time and prioritizing it, and just having night after night after night good sleep. However, there is a whole group of us, and I am in that group, where sleep is the first thing to go. And it is this elusive thing where you look at the clock. I did this 2 nights ago. Oh, it's 11 p.m. Oh, no, it's noon. Oh, no, now it's noon, midnight. Oh, now it's 1 o'clock. And just that awful thing where I've prioritized it and I'm lying there and I can't sleep. And this is the thing that you need to really pursue. Like, there are things that we can do that can help us sleep. The last thing you want to do is reach for the tablets, because they don't actually give you that deep sleep that you need, that restores mental health. It will make you unconscious to the world, but it won't give you that restorative sleep. So there's a whole host of things that we can be doing to improve our mental health. And if you go on my website on drsallybell.com and look under resources, there is a sleep cheat sheet about some of the things that we can do about sleep. And I'll do a webinar one day and really unpack it and the why, you should do these things. But there are probably the 4 big things around sleep is routine. So getting up and going to bed at the same time every day. It is getting caffeine in all forms, whether that's your green tea, your pop, your coffee, getting it out of your diet to a bare minimum in the morning. It is getting off screens before bed, or I have these yellow sort of blue blocker glasses that gets the blue light, because blue light really suppresses our sleep hormone. So getting out of the habit of having screens before bed. And then the other thing, which we'll touch on next, is actually learning to de-stress. Like, you need to prepare to go to bed. Like, too many of us, and I am guilty of this. I've got 3 kids. I've got a private clinic. I work for the NHS, and like, I can be going at a pace. And then the first time I actually stop to breathe or feel like I'm breathing is when I put my head on the pillow, and surprise, surprise, my head is like, it's time to start processing. And so actually having an attitude that you prepare to go to bed, and that you actually start winding down, and having some practices that hopefully doesn't involve screens to help you do that, is some of the key things. Like, if you get those 4 things in place, and the reason that I haven't been sleeping is that I have been feeling a bit stressed about COVID and being stuck in the house, and my work hours are all over the place. And so, I've had a chat with myself today about, getting some good habits in place so I can start to get some good sleep, because I can feel the anxiety in me more than usual because I haven't been getting that good sleep. So sleep is the thing. It really is. We're losing the light. I will move my little light here. I might turn the big lights on in a minute. So the other thing I want to talk about, so I'm going to talk about food in a minute, because everybody wants to know what to eat. And we are going to do that next. But I'm going to do one of the things that nobody ever wants to know about. And that is this foundation that I call connection. And can I just say, like, in terms of my own recovery, it has been the foundation that I think has brought the most sustainable change. And I talk about connection with self, connection with other people, and connection with that wider sense of purpose. And my experience, with 20 years as a doctor, and my experience in my own journey with mental health, is like, getting this foundation right is the glue that holds everything together. And most people in our modern busy life have become very disconnected from themselves. We are just going at a pace, trying to be the best wife, the best mother, the best worker, the best everything, best at the gym, and we are just so busy and so distracted. And we've got our phones and TV, and we switch off our brains, and we become really, really disconnected from ourselves. And again, like, observationally, I'm not sure I could pull out a scientific paper for this, but observationally, I think, like, we have this innate wisdom within us. And actually, if we're really, really honest, and we slow down enough and we listen enough, most of us know what we need to do. Not all of us. And actually, the art of getting still and the art of really listening and slowing down, there's technique to that, and there's a way to train that muscle and train that ability. But often, if we can become mindful and we can become present, a couple of things happen. One, we're not in our brain worrying about what's about to happen. And when we start worrying about that thing that hasn't actually happened, it releases chemicals in our body that makes us feel anxious or depressed. Or if we're the kind of person that, is really busy reflecting on the past, regretting of what she say, how did that go? And again, that feelings of anxiety arise because our thoughts release chemicals into our body, and that impacts our emotions. Like, the thing about being present, the thing about sitting here and hearing what we hear and smelling what we smell and tasting what we taste and being aware, is that it gets us out of that thinking and worrying about the future, which has a place, but not to be on that kind of hamster wheel all the time, or that melancholic reflections on the past that can influence our emotions, which again has a place. Like, it's good to remember, it's good to reflect, we need to learn, but sometimes we just get stuck, don't we? And the other thing I think it does is often, if you listen to your body, it will tell you you're tired, you're hungry, you're pissed off because you've had an argument. And actually, if you listen deep enough, you often know what to do. And so I think, like, getting connected and learning some techniques. There's great books out there and great videos. Learning how to breathe, learning how to be present is just so important. The other thing I talk about is connection with others. And like, we have an innate, inherent need to be loved and to belong and to feel valued. Like, it is like so essential to all aspects of our health. And there's great research that when we don't have that, it drives disease, everything from heart disease through to mental health issues. Like, if we are socially isolated and lonely and disconnected from people and don't have that sense of belonging, like, I can sort out all the rest that we're going to talk on about, but if you don't have that, like, it will drive disease, and we do you a disservice if we don't talk about that. And so addressing, relationships, addressing toxic relationships, toxic relationships again can just create so much tension and stress in our bodies, and affect our mental and emotional health. That, maybe one of the questions to ask is needing to distance yourself or put some boundaries up around some people that make you feel rubbish about life, and seeking out, those that make you feel good, those that call out your courageous heart, those that make you laugh and make you smile, those that challenge you, but are always bringing out the good in you. Maybe it's about investing some time in that. And then finally, I talk about connection to purpose. And I swear, like, I see so many, especially men, like, they retire and then struggle with their mental health because they've lost that sense of purpose. And again, to maintain, mental health, and there's some lovely work in the Blue Zones with this, which is an area where people live really long. Like, one of the key things that they will talk about is they know why they get up in the morning, whether they're 20, 70 or 100. And one of the things I notice is that a lot of people who struggle with, anxiety and depression, they've lost that sense of purpose, something bigger than themselves, something that calls them out to grow as a person. And so sometimes it's about reflecting on, what brings you fully alive. Like, we're all stuck at the moment, aren't we, with COVID? And but actually, it could be a time to ask some questions. And again, there's some great books out there to help you with that. What does your beautiful life, what could it look like? And having a dream, and what were those things as a child that just you dreamt that you thought you'd do? What makes you feel like, you're fully alive in life? And thinking about connecting with some of those things again can be really incredible around helping people recover their sense of joy and their well-being. So we've talked about sleep, we've talked about connection, and we're going to talk about food. Everybody wants to know about food. What a glorious and wonderful thing it is. So let me just say, like, as a nation, we are the fattest nation in Europe now, and yet we are malnourished, and our body has this incredible ability to heal itself, to maintain its blood sugar, to maintain its blood pressure, to fight off cancer cells every day of its life, to keep us infection free. Like, it is incredible. It is wired It's wired to heal. I'm going to have to turn the lights on. Look, sorry. Are we back? Ta-da! Oh, you can see me a bit better. Anyway, so our body has all these mechanisms that are really incredible, and but it needs the building blocks to do that, and we need to understand afresh that food is more than calories and about getting fat or getting thin. Food offers us these building blocks in order for our bodies to function right. And we need to think of our food in terms of nutrient density, getting food that's just packed with vitamins and minerals and good fats, and getting some of the rubbish out. And my big strapline here is, don't get confused by the nutrition wars that are out there. The key thing is get off processed food that's made in factories, food that's changed, that's got additives in. Our bodies don't know how to deal with it and never have. They've eaten a certain way for millennia. And get back to whole food. That could be the thing, really, in terms of maintaining our mental health, is getting back to real whole food. And that will also have an implication on the rest of our health. Let me just say a little thing about the vegan movement. I have no problem if you're a vegan. Some of my patients are. I like the ideology behind it, but I do have some concerns if people aren't supplementing properly, because you can't get vitamin B12 from anything but animal products. And when you're looking at mental health and nerve health, like B12 is just so vital. And I don't think I've ever come across a vegan who isn't supplementing properly, who has good B12 levels, and that will impact your mental health. So if you're going to do the vegan thing, fine. On my website, there's again a couple of things. One about proteins, if you're a vegan, and how to get enough protein in your diet. And two, there's a bit about micronutrients and things to just be aware of that you might be deficient of. Just do it well, get really educated about it. Because I would never recommend the vegan diet as a healthy choice. I get the ideology and some of the ethics behind it, but personally in 20 years, I've never recommended it. And the other thing to say, also fitting a bit more with vegetarians as well, is that our brain is like 70% fat, and a lot of those fats come from a polyunsaturated fat called EPA and DHA. The best way to get that is through fish, and especially these small oily fish. And we should be having like 3 or 4 portions a day. And that's really, really vital for brain health and for mental health. Now, so you'll struggle to get that as a vegetarian or a vegan. You can convert it from your omega-3s, like your flaxseed and your walnuts. But your body's, the pathway to do that is really inefficient, and it's very difficult to get enough of those special EPA and DHA from that. You can get vegan supplements that come from certain sea algae. The research is yet to see how good they are at maintaining your EPA and DHA, but they are available. And again, if you look on the Vegan Society UK, they've got some stuff on there about that. But if you are amenable to eating fish and eating meat, I would be having 3 or 4 portions of oily fish every week. I would have a real plant slant, so eat a rainbow of different colours, mainly coming from vegetables and nuts and seeds. I'm a big advocate for eating red meat. It's so nutrient dense. It's so easy for us to absorb. So again, if you're not opposed to that, ideally getting it from a place where they farm well. So my eye is on the regenerative farming movement and Pasture for Life, but having some meat in your diet is also just really important in maintaining those minerals and vitamins. And getting the processed food out of your diet. And also, we need to talk about the sugar roller coaster. We just have way too much sugar in our diet, and sugar is toxic. There's no way about it. The World Health Organization have given guidelines that it's 8 teaspoons for men, 7 teaspoons for women. And you can have a look up. And the reason they give those guidelines is that above that, sugar starts to damage your DNA and starts to really mess with your health because it's toxic. And we have it in our diet way too much. Look at that. Costa blueberry muffin with 10 teaspoons of sugar. And, some of our cereals, you've got 4 or 5 teaspoons in there. And we haven't even started the day. And that's before we've reached the chocolate bar and what have you. And so weaning yourself off, and you will have to wean off, most people will, of getting that sugar down is just really important, and filling yourself up with good and healthy fats, and lots of plants and good sources of protein, so that you don't need that sugar. Eating regularly is just really important in terms of maintaining that emotional health. So now I've done tiny little YouTubey things about all those different aspects, about befriending fat and about the sugar roller coaster and about the plant slant and nutrient density, so you can catch up on those. But what we eat is just so important in terms of our mental health, to give our body everything it needs. And the other thing about eating like that is that it feeds our gut bacteria. And we now understand there's more communication going on between our gut and our brain than anything else, both ways. So if you've got an upset gut, or you've got an upset with your gut bacteria, we've actually got trillions of bacteria in our tummies that are good and doing a whole host of things. And one of the things they're doing is helping maintain our mental health. That will affect our brain, just as when we have brain injuries and brain issues, that affects our gut because of this bidirectional communication that's going on. And also, just to say that our happy hormones, so our serotonin, I got told by the drug companies in the 90s and the noughties that, our happy hormones are made in our brain, and that we need to take these medications that go into our brain to lift up our happy hormones. But actually, 70% of our gut bacteria, of our happy hormones, are made in our gut. So actually, the key to being happy and the key to keeping those happy hormones going in our brain is actually thinking about how we eat for a happy gut. I keep making mistakes, so I'm tired. I have been working all weekend for the NHS after our bank holiday. Right, Brill. So that's just some thoughts, and I've blogged a bit about that as well, so you can always have a look on my blog. So there's 2 other things I want to mention. So I've mentioned about prioritizing sleep and looking at sleep hygiene. I've talked about this whole massive topic of connection and connecting to ourselves and others and our sense of purpose. I've touched on how to eat for good mental health, so those nutrient-dense foods and looking after our gut bacteria and eating for a healthy gut. And then let me just mention 2 other things when we're looking at our 5 foundations. One is movement. So do you know what? Just walking in nature, just moving. There are studies that show that regular movement is as effective as taking antidepressants, especially for that mild and moderate depression and anxiety. And I use the word movement instead of exercise, because we talk about exercise, and if you're feeling depressed, you just think, well, you just go no, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to get off the sofa. And actually, if I just talk about movement, sometimes it's just taking a walk. It's literally just walking and breathing and seeing life outside of this. And if you're anxious and going outside, it makes you feel anxious. I often get people to put on their earphones and play music that helps them feel calm, just to get moving and get outside. And actually, when you look at longevity studies, it's the people who are walking, it's not the marathon runners, who live the longest. And so it's getting those steps in is really good for health. And again, if you look wider at health, this constant sitting is the new smoking in terms of the damage it's doing. So it's not so much about the gym, although that is fantastic, those different types of exercise. They definitely are positive for mental health, doing these high intensity interval training, or my thing is yoga or running or doing some weights, or that is important. But I think if you're really stuck and the thought of even engaging in that is too much, then just walk and get out. And if you don't feel safe doing it on your own because you're worried you might do something silly, then walk with somebody. And if you can't walk, then just least get outside. Like sunshine and vitamin D is also really important around our immunity and probably our mental health. So sunshine is just really important too. So sometimes it's just getting out. And there's some lovely little studies about actually nature and some of the like the chemicals that trees produce. They stimulate our endocannabinoid system, which releases some lovely happy feelings in us. It's just beautiful. It's amazing, isn't it? All these things we're discovering. So just getting into nature, getting outside, just walking can be a place to start in terms of that movement piece. And then finally, like we have to look at rest. And again, the World Health Organization are now saying that stress is a pandemic in our world, and it is so normal for all of us to just live at a level that we think is normal, where actually we are constantly stressing our system. And it's really interesting because a lot of people will think stress is just the deadline or getting up and speaking in front of people. But actually, we now understand that a whole host of things stresses us, from what we eat to what we're thinking. Like, we can literally turn on our stress system in our body and all the chemicals that involves, and through how we think. We can also be, because we are not breathing properly, we can have dysfunctional breathing problems that keep us in that stressed state instead of that deep breathing that keeps us in that calm state. And we know that when you're in that stressed state, when we have triggered that in our body, then it does a whole host of things. It closes down our rational thinking so that we cannot think rationally. It reduces our immunity and our ability to fight infection. It raises our blood pressure. It raises our heart rate. It reduces our ability to fight cancer and to heal. And then this part of our brain called our amygdala, goes into hyperdrive and creates these chemicals that really feed into that feeling of anxiety and will really rob us of our sleep. And so then that compounds things, because it's when we sleep that we heal up emotionally. So I always say, like, if you can't give me 5 things that you do on a regular basis to combat stress, then you are stressed. Like, you need to create some things, and they're very, very personal to you. What de-stresses me will not de-stress you. I am put me in nature, take me away from people, leave me on my own, give me a book, just let me sit. Just let me have the silence. And like, that is my way back to de-stressing. I love yoga. I love moving and breathing. But for some people, like, that would freak them out. And actually they need a cuddle, and they need to be with some people that make them feel good and they can process externally. And, they need to go out and in the garden and do a bit of gardening. And so that whole piece, again, it's that self-awareness. It comes back to that whole idea of connecting with self, that in order to reduce stress and the impact on our body, we need to learn how we individually are wired, and we need to have the courage to put some self-care in place and put these rhythms and these practices in place, because that will keep us healthy. It will help me be a non-shouty mum. It helped me be a better wife. It helps me be better at work. And so, although sometimes it feels like, I'm being really selfish because here I've got to go and take another hour and be on my own because I'm losing the plot. But actually, it's an investment, because it helps me reduce my stress. It helps me sleep. It helps me maintain my mental health. So those are just some ideas. I'm blogging regularly on social media, so you can follow me on Dr. Sally Bell's handle on Instagram and Facebook. I do a weekly newsletter. Again, my heart and passion is to drip feed you and the whole nation all of these lovely things that you can do to regain your health. And there's so much that we can do. and that the doctor doesn't need to do, that we can do to recover our health in so many ways. And so my heart is just to keep drip feeding this to you and just giving you ideas. And so do sign up to my newsletter on my website, drsallybell.com, or subscribe, and please put your questions. And if you've enjoyed this today, I have got a couple of questions. So you mentioned fish intake for oils. What fish examples and how often? So that's from Ray. Hi, Ray. So if you're eating fish, so the key with fish is think what fits on a plate, because with big fish, they get contaminated with heavy metals and get a whole host of other problems. So I talk smash, so sardines, mackerel, anchovies, herrings, and wild salmon. That's a bit bigger than a plate, and not the farmed, because that has a very different nutritional profile. How we farm and how we produce our meat and our fish has an impact on its nutritional content. That's why I've started talking about the need to ask about where our food comes from and how it's produced. So smash, so sardines, mackerel, anchovies, herrings and wild salmon is what I'd recommend, and I'd recommend 3 or 4 portions a week. From a mental health point of view, they've done studies when they've looked at heart disease about taking fish oil supplements. So my daughter's vegetarian and I have her on fish oil supplements, just from a point of view of getting that EPA and DHA. And it might be something you want to consider if you're a vegetarian, or if you couldn't stand the thought of that, then exploring about getting a vegan option of the EPA and DHA, which she's starting to come to market. So unless you've got any other questions, I am going to round this up. I am going to do the next one on women's health, and just going to take you through that whole journey of our hormones, so the men might want to watch too. And I'm probably going to do that in 2 or 3 weeks. I've got some sets of nights next month, so I need to kind of work out how to do that well, because I will be feeling quite stressed by that. So I will let those that have been following me know about that. And I've got a couple of other questions. So from Rebecca, another food one, please. What are your thoughts on probiotic yogurts? Do they help with gut bacteria, etc., like they claim to? Many thanks. Oh, that's actually from Duncan. So, right, we have these trillions of gut bacteria, and we've wrecked them with our lifestyle, our drugs, how we're producing our food, what we're eating, and what it should be is this really diverse, robust community, and it does a host of things, everything from it's linked with brain disorders through to cholesterol, through to our mental health, through autoimmunity, through to allergies, just everything. Like, they are incredible. We had no idea about this 20 years ago. So how do you change that gut bacteria to benefit our health? It is an area that is growing every month. There are studies coming out, hundreds and hundreds, and we are learning all of the time. But if you look at probiotic supplements, I don't know about just looking at yogurt, then especially commercially bought. But if you went for probiotic supplements, there's different research looks at different probiotics. They're a combination of all different types of bacteria. So it's difficult to say it as a broad spectrum, all probiotics, but probiotics on the whole don't do any harm. Worst thing is they might be wasting a bit of money, but on the whole, they seem to benefit health. However, when you stop taking them, you lose the benefit. And actually, at present, the only research that shows how to permanently change gut bacteria is changing our diet. And it changes, and you can change your gut bacteria within days by changing how you eat. So there's a great guy, I can't remember his name. His name's gone. He's a great, I follow him, so he's a great guy around gut health and diet and what have you. And the other thing just to add in is that lack of sleep and stress, that also affects your gut bacteria. So it's not just about what you eat, like it's that whole thing. So I've got a question from Matthew. How often would you recommend eating red meat? Also, there are sources such as Game Changers movie that state beef and there is a lot of confusing information out there. Do you have any advice? One of my advice would be to read an article I've written on my blog, which is my beef with the vegan movement. Well, actually, my beef with the vegan food industry. I really don't like Game Changers. I thought the science wasn't great. I think the issue isn't meat, it's how we produce our meat, in terms of the environment and in terms of our health. I think red meat is hugely nutrient dense. I would recommend a minimum of a couple of times a week. And what I would tend to suggest is that you get really, really good quality meat, and work out that it's either pasture fed ideally or grass fed and organic. And certainly if you ever eat chicken, I would eat organic. I wouldn't ever touch a non-organic chicken because of all the antibiotics that are in it. Yeah, but that's a whole discussion in itself. So maybe if you have a look on my website and have a quick look at an article I wrote there. Yes, and it is very confusing. The nutrition wars are confusing. I found it hugely confusing coming into it, and have spent the last 5 years delving the research to land where I am. But that's, it'd be another good discussion. So great. Yeah, I think that's everybody's questions. So thanks for joining me today. Yeah, if you're a lady or a man, you can join me for my women's health one next, and I'll put something up for that. So it's been great. So bless you. And yeah, I hope you're doing okay in COVID. And if you're desperate, just pick up the phone and speak to Samaritans or a friend and just start talking about some of this stuff. So brilliant. All right. Bless you. Bye.